Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for sharing your lunch hour with me and with Adrian Foley. Adrian and I serve on the Minnesota PRSA Accreditation Committee. So really grateful to have you all here. You know why you're here. We're going to talk about the APR process. When Adrian and I were talking about this, April's APR month, we love to get people together around this topic this time of year. I said, I feel like the process seems more overwhelming than it needs to. I don't think it needs to sound this hard. And yes, accreditation, it's serious, it's important, it's meaningful, but I also don't think it should seem insurmountable. And so we really kind of landed on this idea that we need to just demystify the process a bit. So I hope that today's webinar will do that for some of us, many of us. If some of you have also thought about this process in the past and are revisiting it, it seemed daunting, or maybe you weren't sure where to start, I'm hopeful that by the end of today's webinar, there are some clear thoughts about how you might go about that. You might have seen in the invitation that for anyone who's interested, one of the outcomes of today is the opportunity to join an APR cohort. So we can talk more about that at the end of the call, but really looking to gather like-minded folks together. If you want to dig in and get your APR in the next 6 months, let's pair you up. Let's find a mentor, let's find a group who's looking to do the same, and let's get you over the finish line. If you think a year or two sounds like the right fit, we can design a cohort for that too. So that's really one of the takeaways from today, rather than, hey, good luck. Adrian and I really want to be here to support you. So please keep that in mind. Also, we're a pretty informal crowd. So, pop off mute anytime, throw a question in the chat. Really want to make sure that this webinar is giving you what you need to understand and sort of unpack what it means to work toward your accreditation and PR. So with that said, welcome. I'm Emily Cheney. I earned my APR back in 2019. It was a different time. It was prior to the pandemic. A lot has changed in that time, and a lot has stayed the same when it comes to the APR process. So we're going to talk a bit about that today, and you'll also get a chance to hear from a few folks who are really in the thick of this process. Sometimes it's nice to hear from people who are doing it right now. We have a guest on today who just earned their APR less than 2 weeks ago, and someone who's taking the exam in about a month. So awesome opportunities to hear from those folks. In my day job, I am the Director of Enterprise Public Relations and Reputation at Marvin. You might know that legacy Minnesota company that makes windows and doors. So I had about 14, 15 years of experience when I went and earned my APR. If you're thinking about eligibility, which we'll dig into in more detail as we work through, at least 5 years. I have a feeling this crowd already knows that. So if you're here, chances are you're eligible. So let's look at the overview of today. How are we going to demystify this APR process? We're going to talk a little bit about what is accreditation. Again, I think people are probably fairly familiar, but we'll cover those basics. We'll also talk a little bit about the Universal Accreditation Board. This is the governing body for accreditation. Certainly very closely affiliated with PRSA, but one more acronym for you to be familiar with. We'll also talk about eligibility and fees. Want to make sure that this is really clear. Am I eligible? How much will it cost? How do I think about that process? Definitely want to spend time on any questions there. And then there are really 5 steps to earning your APR. It can feel like 500 when you look at the amount of paperwork and the details involved, but there are 5. And Adrian and I really want to make sure that it's clear how you can move through this process and do it on the timeline that best serves you to get to that finish line, to earn that APR, and hopefully kind of break down what can maybe seem to be a little bit complex. There are also lots of resources out there. A lot of really smart folks have done incredible work to summarize the APR process, study guides, flashcards, videos, study groups. Want to make sure that you see the amount of available resources really based on any way that you like to learn. There's a lot out there that can make this process easier. And some of our candidates who have recently been in the thick of that, like I mentioned, can share what's really been working well for them. So what's accreditation? Accreditation in PR it's our professional credential, right? When it comes to public relations, this is it. And it is a rigorous process that is intentional. It shouldn't just be grabbable for anybody. And it's definitely more than tossing a few letters after your name, which I see Adrian did in her screen preview today, and I missed. So good job adding those letters to your name. But it's really a demonstration of your commitment to public relations, to the professional advancement of this work. It certainly demonstrates that broad and strategic knowledge and your abilities. It's really a high level of professional experience and competence too. This isn't part of the script, but in my personal experience, I think PR can get a tough rap sometimes. There are a lot of folks, and I'm guessing many of you who have encountered them will say, oh, why don't you spin this into something? Or, make this go away, or make magic, or the perception that PR are, fixers in a way that might seem maybe not always above board. APR is different in that it symbolizes it, for me personally anyway, and I think probably for many of you, that commitment to ethical public relations work. So there are lots of reasons why folks might choose to pursue their APR. For me, on a personal note, I decided I didn't want to go back to school and earn a master's degree. Wasn't the right fit in my life, and I really am and always have been focused in public relations in my career. This was a really good fit at a really good time for me to demonstrate that commitment. And it usually prompts great conversation. My colleagues will say, what is that? It's an awesome opportunity to explain a little bit more about PR than maybe the average person might initially perceive. Another long-winded way of thinking about it, in my opinion, is reputation management, or the practice of reputation management that so many of us do. So I mentioned a new acronym, maybe for some. It was for me when I was going through the APR process, which is the UAB, or the Universal Accreditation Board. This is how accreditation is accredited. So there's a consortium of 9 different organizations, and there's a real range here. Certainly some you're probably very familiar with, like the Public Relations Society of America. Others that maybe are particularly niche or relevant for certain groups, like the National Association of Government Communicators. There are also a few state level public relations organizations, states like Florida and Maine, also the Puerto Rico, the territory. They have their own participating organizations as well. Not super critical to know, other than to say that all of these groups come together and recognize under the Universal Accreditation Board the accreditation that is offered through APR. The UAB is administered by PRSA. So they are managing the day-to-day operations of this organization, including tracking applications, right? So one kind of basic component, but they also manage renewal. We'll get into this a little bit more in the details. APR is something you earn for life. It is a lifetime accreditation, but like anything, it also requires maintenance. So if you decide to pursue the APR process and earn your accreditation, you will work on a renewal every 3 years. Compared to the process of earning your APR, renewal is no big deal. So I don't want that to scare anyone off. If you function in public relations most days, if you attend a handful of continuing education courses, webinars, events, if you speak on a panel, you would have no problem earning your renewal credits over a 3-year period. But flagging it now, because it's nice to know that you only need to do the APR process once. So the nuts and bolts of eligibility and fees. Anybody who is a PRSA member in good standing can earn accreditation. So there are also some of those other organizations I mentioned you could be a member of. We don't really have much Minnesota affiliation there, but if you were a good member in good standing of the Florida Public Relations Association, you certainly would be in the same boat here, eligible to apply. It's also highly recommended that you have 5 years of public relations experience. And this is, probably not 3 or 4 years of interning in college and 1 or 2 years in an entry-level role. It is really 5 years of full-time paid professional experience, pretty deeply ingrained in public relations. Certainly we see a lot of people who maybe started their career in journalism or have done a lot of work in broader corporate communications or marketing communications who have a niche or a particular interest in PR also pursue their APR. This is not to say that is the only path. Maybe the bias here is it can be one of the easier paths. But if you are focused on public relations in your day job, even a good portion of the time, and have been for 5 years or more, you're going to be well equipped on the eligibility front. As far as fees go, there's really only one fee, and it is the computer-based exam. So you'll see as we work through the process steps today, this is the end. At the time you hit the computer-based exam, you are paying a fee of $385 to take the exam, and that's the cost. It's the only required cost. There are other opportunities earlier in the process if you choose to take a study course or other things where you could invest more in this program if you wanted. But really, the APR program is designed and has a really thorough study guide such that you shouldn't have to spend anything else if you don't want to. If you do, great. Some associations, and this does include PRSA, rebate a portion of that cost once you earn your accreditation. So if you were to take the exam and if you were to pass, typically you receive $100 back. So you're knocking your costs down here to $285. If that's an incentive coupon, if anybody likes to sort of earn their cash back here, that is something that happens at the end of the exam if you pass with your membership and affiliation with Minnesota PRSA. I touched on lifetime accreditation, those renewal requirements. When you renew, you'll have a certain number of hours to hit over that 3-year period. There are loads of ways to get them, and you will pay $75 once every 3 years for that renewal. So that's it. These are the costs up front. The study guide is at no cost. There are online exams. We can talk about the other resources. A vast majority of the resources that are available also come at no cost. I throw this in here because I think it's relevant, and I know everyone works in different organizations, budgets look different, but I did share my APR process with the organization I work for at the time I was doing it, and they were more than happy to cover the cost. So if you're debating about ways to maybe cover the cost of the fees or of the exam, maybe study materials you might like to purchase, I'd encourage you to look at your professional development budgets if you have one at the organization you're working at and think about where that might be a fit too. Again, I know everybody's organization is different and budgets and what they are and where they're available can be challenging a lot of the time, but it might be an opportunity. And if you'd ever like help thinking about how to approach your employer, Adrian and I can be resources for that as well. I'm going to take a quick pause. So that is really the nuts and bolts of the upfront portion. We're going to start to talk about the steps to APR next. But does anybody have questions about anything we've covered with regard to eligibility or fees? What in the world is APR? Anything like that? I don't see any in the chat, but I'll just take a pause in case anyone wanted to come off mute and ask any questions about where we're at. Awesome. Okay, we'll keep moving forward. Please don't hesitate to throw your questions in the chat or just pop off mute, throw your hand up if there's anything here that's not tracking for you. So like I mentioned, 5 steps. Some of these are certainly bigger than others, but there really are 5 steps to earning your APR. The first is to set that goal. Make a plan and set that goal to attain your APR. This is where this group in particular can be a great resource to you, but it's really deciding, what do I think might my approach be? What do I think my timeline might be? And how could I work backward from that to earn my APR? For me, well, maybe I should start with PRSA notes. PRSA typically says a candidate can move through the APR process in about 4 to 6 months. I took about 5 months. I started in October of 2018 and wrapped up my APR in March of 2019. But I was on it. Like, I was working the process at that time and was very much like, okay, this is fresh. It's my assignment. I am working it. I know others who have spent considerably more time because that's what's worked for them. So there are folks who've spent about a year, 14 months, 16 months working through the process. Great. It could be a busy time at work. You could have a project pop up out of the blue. Things in life happen and change. There is no set in stone timeline you need to finish this, except for once you submit your application. So we'll talk a little bit about that too, but that's why setting this goal up front and thinking about kind of preparing your materials can be a really helpful way to decide how you want to work the process and what feels realistic. It's also why we're suggesting that cohorts can be a good fit. So if you and others want to work on a similar timeline, that can be really advantageous. So we'll dig into that in a little bit more detail. The next step is to complete the panel presentation questionnaire. We'll take a look at the structure of that here shortly. Your third step is to actually submit your application and payment. Every time I look at this timeline, I feel like that's out of order. Surely that is the first thing I do. Why is that the third? The reason it's third in the APR process is because that's when the only clock that applies to this process starts ticking. So when you submit your application and payment, you have 1 year to complete your APR process. It helps to go in being most of the way ready so that you don't feel that pressure on that timeline, that 1 year isn't sort of chasing you, because it's definitely very feasible to get it done in that timeline. The fourth step is to deliver your panel presentation. We'll get into the details of what that looks like. And then lastly, and it is the last and final, and Madison, who's joining us today, literally just did this a week and a half ago, you will complete the virtual computer-based exam. Once you've completed the virtual computer-based exam, that's it. You're done. If you pass, you have earned your lifetime APR accreditation and you are in renewal mode. Now, virtual is like emphasized here because there may be some of you who started this process previously or have talked to others who've earned their APR. I would be one who went to a testing facility and sat next to folks who are maybe earning their CPA or other exams. There was a whole process to make sure that I wasn't bringing in any materials and I wasn't cheating. You can now do it at home. So you can now take this virtually, which also makes even just the hassle of scheduling that a lot easier. So if that's something that you've heard about in the past or was maybe getting in your way, this is now something you can do virtually, which again, from a scheduling standpoint, is just kind of a nice plus up. So we'll take a look at each of these steps in a little bit more detail, and wanted to, again, encourage you to put any questions in the chat as we walk through. Okay. So on the first one, we chatted about this already, but this is the opportunity to plan your timeline. When you're going to set your goal to attain your APR, this really helps. How quickly do I want to try to move through this process? Do I want to achieve my APR in 2025? Is it my 2026 mid-year goal? Is it aligned to something I have going on professionally? Is there a big event happening and I want to avoid that, or I want to finish before or after that? When I was going through this process, I genuinely looked at like, what are my business strategic plans? What do I have to get done this year? And what are those peak moments? This is not going to align with that. So think about that. Like we talked, the timeline, 4 to 6 months is kind of the average if you're really prioritizing this. 12 to 14 months, no big deal. You want to take 2 years? Great. There's no issue with any of that other than, again, emphasizing that 1 year timeline from the day you submit your application. The other thing, like I've already mentioned several times, but we just really believe in it, is that there's an opportunity at that moment when you say, yep, I want to pursue my APR and I'm thinking about my timeline, to put your hand up and either think about joining a cohort or requesting a mentor or both. So this is completely optional, but folks have often said this is one of the more helpful parts in going through the APR process. Adrian and I are familiar with lots of folks, ourselves included, who are interested and willing to be mentors to you through this process. You could say, I'm looking for somebody to be an accountability buddy. Once a month, I want someone to email me and say, how's it going? Do you need help? How am I doing? It could be once every 2 weeks, I'd like to meet with a group in person, or once every quarter, I'd like to have a check-in with people who are in the same, part of the cohort process with me. We're also hoping to pair mentors with cohorts. So sometimes there's a good peer pressure to having 2 or 3 folks hook up with a mentor and keep each other on track, accountability buddies, if you will. We're really glad to sort of match make and make that possible for people who'd like to get through the process in a group. The deliverable here, and you'll see one of these at each of these slides, so you can hopefully keep track of what it is that you need to do at each part, is just to connect with me or with Adrian, connect with your Minnesota PRSA accreditation chair and say, hey, I'm interested. I'm ready to take the next steps. Let's work through it. So that's the first step in the APR process. Madison, thanks for chiming in on mentor. I will say we are really fortunate, especially in Minnesota PRSA, to have some deep experience in the mentor base. Minnesota PRSA has had a big hand in developing the exam curriculum, in developing the study guide. There are folks who more than know it, they wrote it. So when I say that we've got incredible resources in this chapter, it's an understatement, and they're passionate about the process. So leaning in and using them is hugely advantageous. Uh, Looking on to our next step. Oh, Bob, thank you. Yes, we would love to see you in a cohort. The next step is to think about the questionnaire. So in the APR process, you're completing a panel questionnaire. And this can maybe sound a little confusing because there's a panel and there's a panel questionnaire. The questionnaire for the panel precedes your panel presentation. When I think about what APR is testing, they are looking at your writing ability, your strategic thinking, your presentation skills, and then the knowledge you can present in an exam. So to me, the panel questionnaire is really that opportunity to showcase your writing ability. This questionnaire is going to highlight your organization and your role. So we've thrown in a few sample questions here just to give you a flavor of what you could expect as you start to fill out the panel questionnaire. It might be something like, describe how your agency, department, or operation is organized. This is the stuff we know, like the back of our hand, right? But help me make sense of what you do, how do you do it, and how does it interact with others in your organization or within your client structure? Then it'll include something like, describe the reporting structure, the personnel, and the key relevant roles of each person on your team. How does your organization work? Do you get it? Can you explain it? Right? An opportunity again to communicate in writing about what you do and how you do it. Those are a few samples. This questionnaire is lengthy. It is detailed. Typically, and you'll see here at the bottom, the deliverable is something in the range of 10 to 20 pages of written responses. And the deliverable on your part is to complete the questionnaire and provide it as a PDF. At the same time, you're also going to use your panel questionnaire and then eventually your panel presentation to demonstrate your experience. So a component of the written questionnaire, as well as what you'll present in your panel, is really demonstrating your familiarity with the archive process. So research, planning, implementation, and evaluation. In short, a good plan. And this is a really interesting opportunity to pick a passion project. Maybe something you're really proud of, something you worked on that was really successful, something you worked on that wasn't. Janet Swiczkowski was my APR mentor, and one of the most relieving things she said to me in this process was, the panel presentation you deliver doesn't have to be about a perfect project. We all know there's no such thing as the perfect PR project. Undoubtedly, there are things on anything you would present that you wish you would have done better, you would do differently, seeing your results, you would optimize your process. Those are things you should call out in the APR panel. So to say, you know what, I had 10 grand and I needed 100,000, but based on what I had, here's what I did. Or my organization wasn't interested in allowing time for the research. Here's what I would have done in a perfect scenario, and then going on to explain your project. So I think a lot of people can get hung up at the point of choosing the perfect project to describe in their panel questionnaire or to deliver in their panel presentation. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can apply whatever the missing strategy or the missing components might have been, but it'll be really important to showcase your understanding of all steps in a good strategic public relations plan. Adrian and I have loads of examples, including our own, of past panel presentations, and can show you the full range. If you did the work on behalf of a client, great. If you did the work in-house, great. Really doesn't matter. Also, if there are concerns, these presentations are confidential. So you can certainly speak broadly if your organization doesn't allow for certain things to be shared externally, but you can know that the information being shared in that presentation is confidential. It doesn't have to be made available to everybody. If it was, say, on a sensitive topic related to a crisis scenario, for example, really the work that showcases best. Lacey, picking a project is so hard. We could definitely connect. Let's talk more about that. But picking a project can feel really insurmountable. So let's chat about that at the end of the discussion. Your panel presentation is also going to look at, and I think it's clear here, but it is a specific instance. So I think it would be challenging if you were thinking about bringing a panel presentation forward that covered 3 or 4 or 5 years worth of work. I would encourage you to look at a specific moment in time. We launched a product, and here's what we did. We started an influencer program, and here's how it began. It can be, I think, a little unwieldy to say, you know, here's a look at our body of work over a really extended period of time. And chances are you already have this written. you probably just need to reorganize the information a little bit. Your company probably has a planning approach or a deck or a way of working that is specific to your organization. Chances are reordering the slides, adding some missing information, building out a few pieces, you undoubtedly have something to start from or to work with. So glad to help folks with that as well. So you're here. You have completed your questionnaire. You've identified your topic, your project, your proposal, the thing you'll be sharing. You've written about it in your questionnaire. You are ready to schedule your panel presentation. This is the moment you're going to submit that online application, submit your payment, and this is my flag. This is when the clock starts ticking. This is when you will first receive notification from that governing body we talked about, the Universal Accreditation Board, within a few weeks that you have been confirmed as eligible, you are moving forward. It's a bit of a formality, but it does have to happen. And then this is the moment from which you will have 1 year to complete and advance to the computer exam. Now, all you have left in this 1 year period is to deliver your panel presentation, study for the exam, and action take. So 1 year can sound short in some instances, but I assure you it is plenty of time if you have done the other work up front. So again, the deliverable here is actually physically completing that online application and submitting your payment. This might be one of the easier ones. Next, you will deliver your panel presentation. This happens in advance of the computer-based exam. And just to make sure there's clarity, you must receive an advance from the panel presentation in order to take the computer exam. So this order of events is set in stone. You can't take the computer-based exam and come back to your panel, or get a not advance on your panel, take the exam and come back. This order of events is set. So in the panel presentation, you will present that project we were just talking about, that plan that follows the RPI model, to a panel that is comprised of 3 accredited PRSA members. So these are Minnesota PRSA members. We usually have loads of folks who are really excited to sit for panels, having participated in many, including Laura's recently. You learn a lot. They're really fun. You get to hear and kind of get an inside scoop on what other people are working on. You have a 2-hour time frame, and these are held locally. You could decide, like I said, I am in the pre-COVID era of presenting, so I was definitely delivering this in person. Today, most of our panels are delivered virtually. Makes life, scheduling, location a lot easier. Entirely your preference and the panels, how you might like to deliver your content. But your deliverable here is a PowerPoint presentation. So you have up to 2 hours to really demonstrate your expertise in public relations, in the RPI process, and in doing smart public relations work. The outcome of the panel is the panelists will make a recommendation for you to advance as a candidate or to not advance. It's pretty simple. If you advance, you receive a candidate ID, and this is what allows you to schedule your exam. So you do need that, like I mentioned, in order to move forward. If you don't advance, and this happens, and honestly, we get it, no big deal. You can repeat the panel presentation process after 90 days. So that 90 days is an opportunity to go back and see where your opportunities to sort of improve, zhuzh up your presentation, tighten up your attention to detail on the RPI process. Anything like that can happen, right? So if you don't advance, you definitely have the opportunity to represent your panel and take another shot. I'm going to pause right there. So I see a few questions coming up in the chat. Does anybody have questions on the panel presentation process? I personally, this is where I probably spent 40% of my APR effort was really on developing a great panel presentation. Laura had fun. Nice. Most common
Because you are
mistake
my host, Emily.
That does make it fun. I see a question
Mhm.
about the common mistakes that tend to result in a non-passing outcome. I don't sit on every panel, so I can't attest to every non-pass, but I would say more often than not, it is missing a component or more than one component of the RPI process. So if your presentation doesn't clearly demonstrate research, planning, implementation, and evaluation, you will have a difficult time receiving in advance. I want to emphasize again, like I mentioned earlier, though, if your plan was one where maybe for whatever reason you were in a situation where the program that you did somehow didn't get evaluated. I don't know what world that would be in, but let's just pretend that's one. For whatever reason, we weren't able to measure results or we weren't given the time to evaluate. Maybe you left the organization. You can absolutely say all of the things you would have done to evaluate that program and demonstrate your knowledge. Also, it might be a scenario in which you didn't meet the goals of the program. We get it. That happens. Sometimes funding is cut the day after your program goes live. What you would have done, what you would recommend, how you would show up as a good PR counselor, that can be detailed and explained here. So maybe an example, I spoke a lot about in my panel presentation, an influencer program we were standing up at Marvin. We had a few influencers that were really far into the program. We had a few that had just barely started. So I talked about both and explained what we had learned from the set we had worked well with, and also really highlighted some of our missteps and things we would do better and differently, and then noted how those were being addressed as the program was evolving. And then identified the fact that we didn't have metrics for everything yet, but we knew what we would be measuring and how we would be leveraging those evaluation moments to inform the ongoing deliverables for the program. The program doesn't have to be completely finished. It definitely doesn't have to be completely perfect. The goal here is to understand how you think and that you are accurately representing the RPI process in the steps in your day-to-day work. So in my opinion, that would be one of the biggest. I also think if you're using language that doesn't follow RPI, it can be harder for the panelists to follow along and really check the list of what they're hearing you explain. Your organization probably uses a different framework for planning. For this presentation, it is important to say, here is my research, here is my planning, here is my implementation, here is my evaluation. Adrian had noted in a prior presentation, and I think it's so true, the panelists are cheering you on. They are other practiced PR professionals who want to see you succeed, and they are looking for and listening for these things so that they know that your plan has identified them. So if your organization calls it something else, I'd strongly encourage you to think about using the PRSA model or framework for this to make it easy for the panelists to hear everything they need to hear too. I hope that answered that question. The other thing I maybe would build on as far as what might it result in a not advance is if there's not enough clear public relations work in the program, or if it's a significant amount of work you did not contribute to. So if you are thinking about a broad marketing plan you might want to bring forward and there aren't enough clear maybe strategies and tactics that align to public relations initiatives, or the metrics are on things that don't actually cover some of the public relations strategies and tactics, you might think differently about the panel project you bring forward. Amanda, I see your hand up.
My question is, how much interaction during that 2-hour presentation is there between you and the panel members as you're presenting? Are you doing a lot of like back and forth while you're doing the presentation, or do they let you just give the presentation first and then you take questions and after that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thank you. We can definitely add that into future decks because it's a good call out here. I would say for the very vast majority, it is you having really the airtime. You're going to have a good 45 plus minutes, if not more, to run the show. You can also set the tone. If you said, hey, I'd love to take your questions along the way, or I'm going to pause for questions at a few key moments, and I'd love to take any questions at the end. You really kind of get to drive your bus on that part. Panelists are all different humans too, so they might take it differently, but the vast majority want to hear from you uninterrupted. I would say panelists often ask questions about things that they either didn't hear or are looking for clarification on. So if somewhere along the way in your presentation they didn't quite hear enough on evaluation, that's a question they will probably dig in on, but they would undoubtedly hold that to give you the chance, right, to share that. So I see the vast majority of that interaction happening in the very latter portion of a panel. So it is definitely yours. They will not say, and now tell us about. And let's move on to the next section where you will. It's maybe more for those who worked in agency, if you're pitching new business. You're up there pitching your new business, right? You are selling your content, typically pretty interrupted. As I say that, I think of several clients I worked with who would have never let me go for 45 minutes uninterrupted. So it might be a bad comparison, but it's definitely your show to run. And you can engage the panel if you'd like, but you are the star of the show. Does that help answer that enough?
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, you bet. Any other questions on that portion? We can absolutely have good group discussion on this at the end too. Okay, so a reminder, at this point, your deliverable is a PowerPoint presentation. In advance of the panel, the actual panel presentation, panelists receive a copy of your panel questionnaire. So this is kind of their Cliff Notes, if you will. They're going to get a chance to understand who you are as a candidate, where you've worked, they understand your organization, and they get a bit of a preview to your presentation. So Amanda, maybe building on your question a bit, they are coming in with some knowledge, right? They are coming in with some understanding that also allows for panelists to get to your level and also ask probably better questions than they might be able to if they're hearing it cold for the first time. In your panel, though, you will want to think about introducing yourself and kind of setting the stage. This is who I am. This is where I work. This is the challenge we were looking to solve. This is the thing we were looking to overcome, the hearts and minds we were looking to shift. That'll be important so that panelists can follow along. After the panel, this is it. You're going to take the computer-based exam. The exam is the final step. And like I said, you used to visit a testing center. Now you get to sit in your favorite chair, be comfortable next to your, slew of beverages, whatever it is that helps you get through it. There are 132 questions, and you have 3 hours and 30 minutes to complete the exam. This is a multiple choice exam, so you are answering questions that might have one good answer. You might pick the 2 or 3 best responses. The questions are worded in a very specific way. I'm sure Madison is probably nodding along, being particularly familiar. One of the things I found most helpful in the APR process was taking practice exams on the APR website. Not so much because I thought I was going to, remember and memorize all the questions, but rather getting familiar with the format in which the questions are asked. So just understanding the structure of the exam is a really good use of your time. I have talked to a lot of public relations professionals who have taken the exam and said, "What? That's not how it would happen in the real world." That's kind of true. APR is looking for the best textbook answer. So they might ask a question along the lines of, you're in a crisis situation, what's the first thing you do? You can only pick one. Or those of us who are practicing would probably pick all of them at the exact same time. So getting familiar with the exam process, getting familiar with the way the questions are asked, and understanding the response that the accreditation exam wants from you does matter in this instance. It is about the best right answer, not necessarily what you did last week for a client because it's exactly what you had to do or what your organization demanded. Getting familiar in that way, I think, really does make a difference. The sweet relief is that as soon as you hit submit on the exam, you passed or you did not. Now, your final official, absolutely buttoned up confirmation comes within a couple days to a couple weeks. I think Madison got hers within a couple days, which feels good. But I have not yet met anyone who finished the computer-based exam, got a pass, and had their results change in any way. It is just buttoning up all the official last details. So you will know as soon as you hit submit on the computer-based exam if you have passed. And like we spoke, that is a lifetime accomplishment, and you are now in renewal mode. I'm just catching up a little bit on some of the questions, but Adrienne, did I miss anything? Is there anything you would highlight as we're going through the steps here?
No, I think, and I've been trying to kind of supplement your commentary with comments in the chat. And I know Laura and Madison have done so as well.
Thank you.
I was probably typing, but did you tell them the secret that they
Oh,
only have
I see
to?
your secret. You don't
Yes,
have to get 100% on this exam. In fact, far from it.
you
And
you
on
only
this
have
slide, you'll see, yes,
2%.
yeah, you are in 62%. I didn't know that by
Nobody knows
numbers.
what percent you have, except for
No,
you.
you pass or you fail as you move through the exam. You don't get a, APR B or an APR C, depending on the outcome of your exam. But yes, I didn't realize until Adrian, I was rereading your notes that it's 62%. Also, we put this slide up around the assessment areas and where the exam focuses because this can really help you steer your study time.
Yeah.
I would not spend 85% of my study time on models, theories, and history. It is 5% of the exam, right? So you really get an opportunity here to consider what time you spend with what portions of the study guide. It's our pie, man. It is a big chunk on our pie and then leading the PR function. If you were to focus your efforts in the study guide, this is a really important piece. I will say, I think for folks who have a public relations degree or went to school in undergrad, some of those models, theories, history, maybe a little bit on ethics and law will be familiar to things that you did. If you are coming out of a journalism background, an English background, something that where maybe those topics weren't covered, I would suggest you spend a little bit more time here. They might not be as familiar or as top of mind as those who maybe did this work in undergraduate. But this is really a snapshot, and it is true. This is how you are evaluated. You get a percentage score in each of these areas, so you will know, how did I do in the RPI section? How did I do in leading the PR function? That is the outcome of your exam. So if for some reason you were to not pass, you would have very clear understanding where you could put more emphasis in study. And we have seen that for some folks. I got really tripped up on this section. It really baffled me, and that's the reason I didn't get through the computer-based exam. No problem. It's a great opportunity to go back to study and put emphasis in that area and retake the computer-based exam. So you can retake or represent, I should say, your panel presentation, and you can also retake the computer-based exam. And you wouldn't be alone. There are many people who have done one or both of those more than once. More often than not, if you are in a cohort, working with a mentor, collaborating with me or Adrian, you will find that you will move through these parts of the process on your first try.
One thing I'd like to add too is, and I see your question, is the retake another 398? I do not believe that's correct. For some reason, I need to check, but I'm pretty sure that's not correct. I think it's a small fee to
I
read.
think there is a fee, but it's not the full
Right.
398. I don't remember
And you
exactly
have
what
a
it is,
certain
but
time frame, like 90 days or something like that. But we can definitely take that and find that out for you. Another thing that I was explaining to Laura and getting her ready for her exam is when you're doing the exam, and again, these are just kind of like little tips that you pick up from having been through the process. There's so much of that that is not in, printed material. And so that's why we're doing this. But one thing, I think you're allowed one piece of paper, and Madison, you tell me if that's still the case. And then you get in there and you can kind of brain dump. That was one thing that was helpful to me, was like, oh, let me scribble down some of the acronyms and things that I've, memorized or learned so that I can refer to them. The other thing is, when you're going through the exam process, you can flag questions that you're able to flag questions that, so basically I went through, answered everything that I knew right away. If a question came up and I just wasn't sure about it, flagged it, went on to the next one. And so at the end of, I can't remember the number of questions you probably said, Emily, at the end of going through all the questions, I think it was like 132. I think I had like 25 flags, but I got the ones that I felt most confident out of the way, and then it gave me time to go back and think through the others. So those are just kind of like testing tricks and tips.
I agree. And I would say the timeline can sound long, 3.5 hours. you have that room. I didn't come close to the deadline. Now,
Right.
it's different for everybody, but I did not need the full 3.5 hours. You
Same.
might. So I think that even that number can sound really sweaty. Like
Yeah.
3.5 hours of staring at my screen sounds really intense and high pressured. 132 questions is a lot, but again, they are not half-page long paragraphs where you are reading
Right.
intense amounts of information. Again, for me personally, getting familiar with the format of the test made a big difference. You will find, I think, in most cases that you have more time than you need.
Absolutely.
Okay. And sorry, my correction in the chat, 385 is the initial cost. We will confirm and share back with this group what the retake cost is, but I just wanted to clarify that 385 is the initial cost. We're going to share this deck with everybody after the presentation, so you don't have to try to scribble down this insane YouTube link that I tried to make easier, but that is the actual link. But there are lots of tools out there. So PRSA has a really in-depth study guide. I know Adrian and I both started the process by printing that 150-page study guide and putting it in a 3-ring binder. It's basically like a free textbook, if you will. It is kind of the end-all be-all when it comes to preparing for the exam. If you wanted to read that cover to cover, highlight the things that are important or meaningful to you along the way, it gives you an opportunity to think about the weighting of the exam and where you might spend your most time reading. For me, that was my tool. I read the study guide. I just read it through once. A lot of things were familiar for me. I have an undergraduate degree in PR, so there were areas I wanted to lean in or focus on, but that was my study tool. And the practice exams, like I mentioned. So I kind of really hung out in this first resource area. There's also an awesome online study course. It's going through a little bit of transition right now, but folks who are on this call have taken it and can speak to it. It is an added fee. It's $260, but it's put on by APR Prep, which is affiliated with PRSA. So you can think about this as truly an endorsed study course. It's at this link here, online2learn.net/APR. They also have a ton of video content. So APR Prep on YouTube. If you weren't going to take the study course, or you maybe wanted to approach some of the YouTube content that's already out there, this link, which we will share with you, is a way to do that. Laura also flagged that in the Quizlet app, there are some really great flashcards. Some other APR folks who have done good work studying for this exam have built out some awesome flashcards. So if an app like Quizlet appeals to you, or flashcards are a way that might help you, I actually inherited someone else's physical flashcards at one point. Things have changed. There's an app for that. This is another great tool. I think you'll also find as you just literally Google on this topic, other chapters have resources. We also keep an eye out on other states who might be offering webinars or courses, boot camps. There's a lot out there, and we can absolutely be a resource to connect you with that. Just because Minnesota PRSA isn't maybe the sponsor or the host of it doesn't mean it's any less relevant or something that you might not pursue. These things can pop up in kind of a timely way. So if there's nothing happening in June and you need a resource, we can go look at the national level to see what's out there. And then, like we talked throughout the call, and sort of above all, mentors and cohorts are where we get really good feedback. We'd love to see another APR cohort, maybe even 2, depending on if folks are, thinking about different timelines, be the outcome of today's webinar. So we would love to facilitate that and be happy to not leave you to figure it out on your own, but connect folks who are thinking about processes in the same way. Since we're going to be sharing that, I'm going to move on because I'd like to introduce both the folks we've talked about today, Madison and Laura. Madison, who is the freshest APR I think we've ever had on a webinar, and then Laura, who is about to be the next freshest APR. So Madison, maybe you could take just a couple minutes to share with the group, with having just come off the APR process, a few of the study tools that were really helpful for you, and maybe any kind of key tips you would leave this group with today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I put it in the chat, but a mentor was definitely my number one. I actually started at the national level with a mentor, and we just didn't jive very well. I wasn't understanding what she was saying. I don't think she understood my questions. And I actually leaned back into Minnesota PRSA and was connected with Jill, who many people know Jill, but she was a phenomenal mentor and really helped me kind of wrap my head around the process. So I can't stress a ton that a mentor is a huge deal, and make sure you find one that is speaking the same language as you. Like, it's no harm, no foul if you find that you're not connecting or driving, that's okay. Um, as I worked through the questionnaire and the panel presentation, I definitely leaned on my mentor. And then as I got ready for the exam part, I was more intimidated by that than I was the other two pieces, because I hadn't taken a test in almost 15 years. I had been removed from college for a long time. I didn't get an MBA. I was very removed from it. And I was like, I don't know if I know how to do this. So prior to doing that, I did a 2-day APR boot camp, and it was super helpful. It helped kind of steer my studying. So I did that a Thursday, Friday. I spent the weekend going through the study guide, using some of the Quizlet resources, and then I took my test Monday morning. And I really liked that timeline because it gave me time to process what I had learned, and then maybe go back and review things. Specifically for me, it was some of the pioneers of PR and some of the legalese terms that I needed more of a refresher on, or I don't come across as much in my day to day. I know we mentioned kind of the logistics of testing. I did test at home. Some things that I would just mention, my test was either 165 or 169 questions, but only 132 were scored. So they have some beta questions in there, so don't be
That's
thrown
right.
off
Thank
by
you for
that.
mentioning that.
Yes, you bet. They're not scored. You don't know which ones they are, which makes it tricky or intimidating. As far as the scratch paper in the boot camp, they told us we couldn't have any of those materials. So I had like cleared off my workspace. I had put things in a closet, taken things off the wall. And then when I got in there, the proctor said that I could have scratch paper. And I was like, nope, there's no way I'm risking this over a piece of scratch paper. Thank you. There is a scratch pad in the test, so you can click in and there's a place that you can type your notes right away if you want to. So like I did some of my little phrases to remember the process or whatnot. So that's in there. And then something not to be thrown or to be aware of is that when you test at home, you join a Google Meets, and then you join it on your phone as well. And you have to set your phone up in a place for them to watch you, both your screen and you. Thankfully, my phone was fully charged because I finished the test at about 18%. So just something to be aware of, that like you do need a fully charged phone and you have to be able to put it up behind you. I don't know why, but those logistics made me very nervous. Like I thought I was going to get there and they were going to be like, oh, no, sorry, you have a piece of paper out. You failed this thing, even though you passed it. So getting those resources is helpful as well.
Those are great notes, Madison, and thank you for being one of the first. In
Absolutely.
this virtual approach to the process, we will definitely build that into the presentation for the future. And I'll add those notes in actually before we distribute this to everyone so that you also have those reference points Madison mentioned about needing a phone and how you can think about sort of your setup and visibility for the exam. It sounds like we also could do some clarifying around the rules on scratch paper and notes. So I'll follow up with APR at the national level on that too, just to make sure that we truly understand what is allowed. Thank you so much for sharing, and congrats again on your APR. And Laura is about to take her exam. Laura, maybe also something people might be wondering is, Madison just explained her process to choosing a date and scheduling her exam. You can pick any date, right? You can pick the exam schedule date that works for you. So maybe you could share a little bit about how you chose a date, what that's like, and also some of the study tools or resources that worked well for you.
Yeah, so again, and I emphasize in the chat, don't overthink it like I did. You guys, I have an MBA, and so I way overthought this. Bao can laugh with me because we were at St. Thomas together at the same time. Like, I overthought so much of it, so that's part of the reason it took me longer. But that's the other nice thing about you don't have to pay until like right before you do the panel presentation, because I started and stopped like a couple times along the way. And yes, thank you, Bao. It's so easy to overthink it, so don't do that. And it's actually the nice thing too is I did my panel presentation actually last July, and just with having 2 young kids, I've taken a long time to study. Also, Laura's overthinking it. I didn't really want to pay more to do the online study course, but I felt like I felt like it would help me like just get ready to take the test. And Adrian really encouraged me to do it. Now, the thing is, because I'm in it right now, the person who has been running it, Michael Henry, who's amazing, is actually about to retire. So I'm in like the last cohort. But the good news is two things. One, they're putting all the videos online. So they have like these weekly sessions that are recorded and they're going to put them all online. And those are really helpful just to have the resources. And I'm not sure, there's like a lot of additional like PowerPoints and other printed resources and articles and test questions and things that they provide through this that there's a ton of value in. And if they're not going to like have a new version of this with a new person running it, I have saved all those in my personal Evernote. And so for those on this call, I will share those with you because they're really, that's what's really been helpful for me is watching these weekly sessions as they go through the different parts. And then the reminders of like, you know, I'm like the history stuff, I'm like, I don't remember who did what. I know who Edward Bernays is. You know, I learned that as an undergrad. But that's only like 5% of the test. So, you know, just to not get hung up on that part as much. A lot of folks have said too, like, do a cram session study. Like the flashcards Quizlet is great. It's helping me a lot. And a lot of them actually have like the sample, not just the like, you know, stuff like remembering, you know, the acronyms and history, but like sample scenario questions. And as I read them, I'm like, yeah, right, that's not real world, but I see what they're going on the test. They'll say things like, that's an objective, not, you know, a strategy, things like that. So just think through it in that way. Doing those practice is super, super helpful. And yeah, just reach out to others. I mean, Adrian has been my mentor throughout it. I met Emily because I am going through the APR process. She ran and like I was going, no, like this amazing human, like you guys, that's in and of itself is worth it. And I had tons of encouragement. Doing the panel presentation, actually, I do say it was fun because I was kind of giggling to myself part of the way through because Rose McKinney was also one of my panelists and I've known her since I was like 22 years old. So we've known each other a long time. And she was like smiling the whole time because she's been telling me for like 20 years now to do this thing. And I'm like, okay, Rose, I'm finally doing it. And so it was really sweet and like comforting because they do really want you to succeed. So there's a lot to it. I'm taking the test early next month. I'm actually traveling to London next week for work, so I'm super excited about. But that means a really long plane ride. So I told my boss, I'm like, well, you know, I'm like, I have this 8 hours to and from London with a layover on the way back. So guess what I'll be doing? I have my binder and my Quizlet, and I'm going to be studying for my APR. And she's just like, I'm so proud of you. I would say too, in comparison for those who have done grad school, like me, I would say it's like the equivalent of 2 grad school classes. And I was looking at the APR website, and some colleges do give like select colleges will give like you get like credit, like 2 classes worth of credit, 1 or 2 classes. And I think like 1.5 to 2 classes is about a comparable amount of work just because of the breadth of that it covers. So if that's a good context for you, I would say that seems pretty accurate to me. So
Awesome. Thank you for
there's a
sharing
lot there.
that, Brad. Lacey is coming in for master's commentary too.
Yep.
Okay, we are right at time. I don't have a hard stop. If anybody wants to stick around for a few minutes and talk through questions or think about anything we didn't cover, or you've got a one-to-one question about APR, I'm glad to hang out here and chat. Otherwise, for anyone who does have a hard stop at 1 o'clock, I just want to flag that we are at time. As far as follow-ups, you will receive this presentation. This recording will be available if you want to come back and watch it or hear any of the conversation again. And I'll also be reaching out to this group in email, as well as a few folks who maybe registered but couldn't join us, to gauge interest in, yeah, I'd like to sign up for a cohort, I'd like to get started, or I'd prefer to work with a mentor one-on-one, or any other number of ways you might want to start the process. Or if you started in the past and you kind of need to figure out where you might want to reboot, I'm here for you. Adrian's here for you. We'd love to coach you through it. And hopefully this broke down the process a bit and didn't make it seem maybe as overwhelming as it might have for some, or it did for me when I first approached. So I'm happy to stick on the line for anybody who wants to hang out and chat. Otherwise, you can expect to hear more in email, and hoping that maybe all of you, if not a really good portion of this group, wants to take the next step.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I'm not
Thank you,
kidding when I say
Adrian
ask
and
me for
Laura.
resources.
Madison.
Like I will give you all my notes. Amanda and I work together, so she knows me really well. I know who's going to be
Yes.
calling me.
You can bring them to the
I will
classics
share
next
it. I
week
will
if you're
share it
coming.
all with no shame because phone a friend. It's part of it.
For sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was super helpful.
Oh, good. And I think
Yes.
a lot of people have left, but I'm going to have a table at Classics next week. So stop by and ask any questions you have.
I will. Absolutely.
Right.
All right. Thanks, you guys.
Thank
Nice
you.
to see you all.
Everyone.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.